What if the deadliest war in history wasn't just caused by a treaty, but fueled by a secret drug that made soldiers feel invincible? To discover the shocking full story and see how these events created the world we live in. Subscribe now and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. If you're here, it means you want to learn not just English, but also about the important moments that have shaped our world. I believe that history is not boring. It is a powerful, emotional, and unforgettable story. People sometimes just explain it in the wrong way. But we will not do that today. Previously, we talked about World War I, the war that was supposed to end all wars. If you haven't watched that video yet, I really recommend it. I explained everything in a simple, clear way, which is perfect for your English listening practice. But today, we move forward. We move to a story that is even bigger a story about the most devastating war in all of human history, perpetu. This was not just a war between armies or countries. It was a war that changed the world forever. Cities were turned into dust. Families were broken and separated, and millions of innocent people lost their lives. Countries that were once strong and powerful were left in ruins, and from those ashes, new superpowers began to rise. By the end of our story today, you will understand why World War II happened. You will see how it all began and how the world we live in today was created from its fire. This is more than just a history lesson. This is the story of the birth of our modern world. So please sit back, relax, and let's begin. Let us improve our English and our knowledge, and let us make sure that history is never forgotten. The story of the Second World War does not really start in 1939 when German tanks rolled into Poland. No, it starts much earlier. It starts in the year 1919, right after the end of the First World War. World War I had left the entire world in a state of shock. Millions of people, soldiers and civilians, were dead. Beautiful old cities were now just piles of broken stone. Great empires that had lasted for centuries had simply disappeared. The countries that won the war, mainly Britain, France, and the United States, wanted to do one thing. They wanted to make sure that Germany could never ever start another war. So in 1919, they gathered together and forced Germany to sign a special document. This document was called the Treaty of Versailles. Inside this treaty, there was one Part 1 article that was especially painful for Germany. It was Article 231, and it became known as the War Guilt Clause. What did this mean? It meant that Germany had to stand up in front of the whole world and accept full responsibility for starting World War I. Even though many countries had been involved in the complex reasons for the war, Germany was forced to take all of the blame. But that was not the worst part. Because Germany was blamed for the war, they were also forced to pay for all the damage. The cost was enormous, a massive amount of money called reparations. The number was $33 billion. In those days, this was an unbelievable amount of money. In today's money, it would be something like $500 billion. Germany was completely and totally humiliated. The Treaty of Versailles also took away huge parts of Germany's land. Their military, once a source of national pride, was almost completely destroyed. Their economy was left in ruins. Germany lost 13% of its land. This included areas that were very rich in coal and iron, the resources they needed to rebuild their industries. Their army was cut down to just 100,000 soldiers, which was a tiny number compared to the armies of other big countries. They were forbidden from having an air force, or tanks, or submarines. They also lost all of their colonies, their lands across the seas. Germany was not just defeated in a war, it was crushed. At first, The world leaders hoped this treaty would finally bring lasting peace to Europe. But instead, it did the exact opposite. It planted a seed of anger in the hearts of the German people. It made them feel desperate poor and deeply humiliated. Just try to imagine this for a moment. You are a normal German citizen in the 1920s. Your country has just lost a terrible war. But now the whole world is pointing its finger at you, blaming you for everything. Your government is weak. Your country is broke. And when you look to the future, it feels hopeless. Wouldn't you feel angry? Wouldn't you somewhere deep inside want revenge? When Germany was forced to pay that huge amount of money, $33 billion, there was a very big problem. Germany had already lost its best industrial land. Its economy was incredibly weak, and the government had very little money. So the question was, where would all this money come from? The German government tried to solve this problem by printing more money. They just printed more and more banknotes. But this turned out to be one of the worst economic decisions in modern history. When a country prints too much money, the value of that money starts to fall. This is called inflation. But in Germany, what happened was much, much worse. It was called hyperinflation. To help you understand how truly bad things became, let me share a few unbelievable facts with you. Before World War I, one US dollar was equal to about 4 German marks. By November of 1923, just a few years later, US dollar was equal to 4.2 trillion German marks. Can you even imagine that number? A loaf of bread that cost just 1 mark in 1918 now cost billions of marks in 1923. People had to use wheelbarrows, big carts, just to carry enough money to the store to buy some food. Some people even started burning money in their stoves instead of firewood, because the paper money was actually cheaper than wood. When workers got paid, they had to run to the stores immediately. If they waited until the next day, their entire salary could be worthless. And maybe the most shocking fact of all is this: Germany's very last payment for the World War I reparations was made in the year 2010. Yes, you heard that correctly. 2010. This means that for almost a century, Germany was still paying for a war that their great-grandparents had fought. Because of this complete economic disaster, millions of people lost their jobs. By 1932, the unemployment rate was 30%. This means that almost 1 out of every 3 German workers had no job. Factories closed their doors. Banks collapsed. People became homeless and lived on the streets. Children were starving because their parents had no money to feed them. The country was in complete chaos. The people were angry. They were frustrated. They were desperate. And when people are this desperate, they start to look for a savior. They look for anyone who can promise them a better future. This was the perfect moment for a man named Adolf Hitler to step onto the stage of history. In times of crisis, people search for someone who offers them hope, someone who tells them exactly what they want to hear. And Adolf Hitler was a master at doing this. Who was this man, Adolf Hitler? He was born in Austria in 1889. He had been a soldier in the German army during World War I, and he believed with all his heart that Germany had not been defeated on the battlefield. He believed it had been betrayed by its own leaders, by the politicians back home. He hated the Treaty of Versailles, and he dreamed of revenge. At first, nobody in Germany took Hitler very seriously. He was just another angry politician in a country full of them. But Hitler was different. He knew exactly how to speak to people, how to manipulate their feelings. Hitler understood that controlling people's minds was much more powerful than controlling an army. So he used newspapers, radio, and his powerful speeches to spread his ideas. His strategy was very simple: Find a common enemy and blame that enemy for everything. He told the German people, "The Treaty of Versailles is the reason for your suffering." He blamed Germany's problems on Jewish people, on communists, and on the politicians who had signed the treaty. He shouted in his speeches that Germany was weak and needed a strong leader, a guide to make it powerful and proud again. And what happened? People believed him. They were so desperate for any kind of solution, any kind of hope, that they didn't look too closely at what Hitler's real plans were. In 1933, Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany. At first, he did not have complete control. Germany was still a democracy. There were still elections, other political parties, and a parliament which was called the Reichstag. But Hitler did not just want to be a leader. He wanted absolute control. He wanted to turn Germany into a dictatorship, a country with only one party where he alone could make all the decisions. But how do you do that? How do you destroy a democracy from the inside? How do you convince millions of people to give up their freedom without them even realizing what is happening? Hitler was a master manipulator. He used fear propaganda and violence to get what he wanted. He convinced the people that Germany needed a strong leader, a Führer, to save them from all their misery. And then, in February of 1933, something happened that changed the course of German history forever. On the night of February 27th, a shocking event took place in Berlin. The Reichstag building, the home of the German parliament, was set on fire. Huge flames lit up the night sky as the historic building burned. People panicked. Who could have done this? Who would dare to attack the symbol of German government? The police moved quickly and arrested a young Dutch communist named Marinus van der Lubbe. Immediately, Hitler and his Nazi party blamed the communists. They said this fire was proof that the enemies of Germany were trying to destroy the country from within. But here is what many historians now believe: it is very possible that the Nazis set the fire themselves. Why would they do that? Because this fire gave Hitler the perfect excuse to do what he had always wanted: to destroy democracy and take complete control. The very next day, Hitler went to the German president, an old man named Paul von Hindenburg. He convinced the president to sign a new law. It was called the Reichstag Fire Decree. This single law suspended all civil rights in Germany. Freedom of speech gone. Freedom of the press gone. The freedom to gather in groups gone. This law allowed the police to arrest anyone they wanted for any reason without a trial. Overnight, Germany changed from a democracy into a police state. Thousands of political enemies, especially communists and socialists, were arrested. They were beaten, or they simply disappeared, sent to the first concentration camps. The German people were told that this was all for their own safety. They were told the government needed these special powers to protect them from dangerous enemies. But in reality, Hitler was just getting rid of anyone who could possibly stand in his way. This makes you think, doesn't it? It was a moment of great fear and uncertainty. If you were a German citizen back then, scared for your family and your country's future, do you think you would have supported these strong actions? Would you have traded freedom for the promise of safety? It's a difficult question. I would be very interested to hear your honest thoughts in the comments below. Just a few weeks after the fire, Hitler took his next big step toward absolute power. On March 23, 1933, he pushed another new law through the parliament. This one was called the Enabling Act. This law was even more powerful. It gave Hitler, as Chancellor, the power to make and pass any law he wanted without needing any approval from the parliament or the president. This was it. This was the moment that democracy in Germany officially died. Some brave politicians tried to speak out against it, but the Nazis used fear and violence to silence them. The SA, who were known as the Stormtroopers, and the SS Hitler's elite black-shirted guards, stood outside the Parliament building. They threatened anyone who dared to vote against the new law. In the end, the Enabling Act was passed. From that day forward, Hitler could rule by decree. Whatever he said became law. There were no more real elections. All other political parties were banned. Only the Nazi Party was allowed to exist. Hitler had done it. He had used the law to legally take complete and total control of Germany. But he still was not finished. Even though Hitler had enormous power, he still worried about enemies inside his own party. There was a man named Ernst Röhm, the leader of the SA Stormtroopers. Röhm and his men had helped Hitler rise to power, and now they wanted more control. Röhm believed the Nazi Revolution was not over, and he wanted even more radical changes. Hitler saw Röhm as a threat. He knew that as long as Röhm and the powerful SA existed, his own position was not completely secure. So in June of 1934, Hitler ordered a massive, bloody purge. In one night, which became known as the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler's SS soldiers moved across Germany. They arrested or executed hundreds of people. This included Ernst Röhm himself and many other high-ranking SA officers. In just one night of violence, the SA was broken. All of Hitler's possible rivals within the Nazi Party were eliminated. After this, the German army gave their full support to Hitler. There was nobody left to challenge him. Then, on August 2, 1934, President Paul von Hindenburg died. He was 86 years old. He was the very last obstacle standing between Hitler and total absolute power. Instead of allowing a new president to be elected, Hitler simply made an announcement. The jobs of Chancellor and President would now be merged into one new role, the Führer, the supreme leader of Germany. From 1934 onwards, Germany was completely transformed. The Nazi Party controlled everything. Schools, newspapers, the radio, even the churches. Children were taught to worship Hitler like a god in special groups like the Hitler Youth. Any books that went against Nazi ideas were gathered up and burned in huge public bonfires. Jewish people, communists, and anyone who dared to speak against the Nazis were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Hitler had promised to make Germany strong again, and for a while it seemed like he was succeeding. Unemployment went down. New roads and factories were built. The economy seemed to be improving. But behind this happy picture, something much more dangerous was happening. Hitler was not just fixing Germany's economy, he was preparing for war. He secretly started to rebuild the German army. He ordered the production of thousands of tanks, planes, and weapons. All of this was completely illegal under the Treaty of Versailles. But Hitler did not care about rules anymore. He was planning something much, much bigger. In his mind, Germany would not just recover. Germany would rise and dominate. He had promised the German people that he would restore their honor and make Germany great again. And he believed there was only one way to do that with revenge, and revenge meant war. The Treaty of Versailles had put strict limits on Germany's military after World War I. Germany was not allowed to have more than 100,000 soldiers. They were not allowed to build tank submarines or an air force, and they were forbidden from placing any soldiers in the Rhineland, a region of Germany that bordered France. But Hitler had no intention of following these rules. In March of 1935, he made a shocking public announcement. He declared that Germany would rebuild its military no matter what the rest of the world thought. This was the moment he openly tore up the Treaty of Versailles. He started a compulsory military service, forcing young men to join the army. The army quickly grew from 100,000 to over 550,000 soldiers. Then, in March of 1936, he made an even bigger, more dangerous move. He ordered his new German troops to march into the Rhineland. This was a huge risk. At that time, Germany's army was still quite small and weak. If France or Britain had reacted with force, they could have easily crushed Hitler's army. But what did they do? They did nothing. France was dealing with its own political problems at home, and the leaders in Britain thought, well, the Rhineland is German territory. Maybe if we let Hitler have this, he will be satisfied and won't cause any more trouble. This was a terrible mistake. From that moment, Hitler knew that the world was afraid to stop him, and that knowledge made him even bolder. From 1936 onwards, Hitler had only one goal: to build the strongest military in the world. Factories all over Germany were secretly converted to produce weapons. They began building powerful tanks, the famous Panzer tanks, that could smash through enemy lines. They built hundreds of new fighter planes, and the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was born again. They built battleships and submarines because Hitler wanted to challenge Britain's control of the seas. Most importantly, Hitler worked to change the minds of the German people. Through constant Nazi propaganda, he convinced them that they were a superior race, the Aryan race. He told them that Germany had been betrayed in World War I and that they needed more land to live and grow a concept he called Lebensraum. People were told that Germany was only defending itself, only taking back what was rightfully theirs. They didn't realize they were being prepared for a massive war. Meanwhile, Hitler started looking for friends, for allies. He found one in Italy with its dictator, Benito Mussolini. Mussolini also had big dreams. He wanted to rebuild the ancient Roman Empire, and he saw Hitler as a strong partner. In 1936, Germany and Italy formed an alliance called the Rome-Berlin Axis. Later, the country of Japan would join them. This was the beginning of the Axis powers, the group of nations that would fight against the world. Hitler's next target was Austria. He had been born in Austria, and he always believed that the two countries should be one since they both shared the same German language and culture. But the Treaty of Versailles had forbidden Germany and Austria from uniting. Did Hitler care about that rule? Of course not. In March of 1938, Hitler sent his army into Austria. This event was called the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria. The Austrian government did not resist, and Hitler was welcomed into the city of Vienna by huge crowds of cheering people. And once again, Britain and France did nothing. Hitler was conquering new lands without firing a single shot. Next, Hitler turned his eyes towards Czechoslovakia, a new country that had been created after World War I. Inside Czechoslovakia, there was a region called the Sudetenland. Many German-speaking people lived there. Hitler used this as an excuse. He demanded that the Sudetenland be given to Germany. Now the world was very worried. The leaders of Britain and France knew Hitler was dangerous, but they were desperate to avoid another terrible war. So instead of standing up to Hitler, the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and other leaders decided to meet with him. They met in the German city of Munich in September of 1938. And there they gave in to his demands. This became known as the Munich Agreement. Britain and France allowed Hitler to take the Sudetenland. They hoped that this would finally satisfy him, that he would stop after this. Chamberlain flew back to Britain famously, waving a piece of paper and saying, "I believe it is peace for our time." But Hitler had no intention of stopping. Just 6 months later, in March of 1939, his army invaded and took over the rest of Czechoslovakia, breaking his promise. And at that moment, Britain and France finally knew the truth. Hitler would never stop. He could not be trusted. The world was now standing on the very edge of war. War was no longer just a possibility. It felt like a certainty. We are about to enter the war itself, and the story gets even more intense and heartbreaking from here. To make sure you don't miss how it all unfolds, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next part of this incredible story. As Hitler was preparing his armies, he also had a secret strategy to make his soldiers almost unstoppable. In the late 1930s, Nazi scientists had developed a powerful new drug. It was called Pervitin. Today, we know this drug as methamphetamine or crystal meth. This little pill gave the German soldiers extreme energy. They could march for days and nights without needing to sleep. It gave them a feeling of superhuman confidence, making them feel fearless and invincible. It took away their feelings of hunger and pain, so they could keep fighting even when they were exhausted. The German army gave out millions and millions of these Pervitin pills to its soldiers. They became like unstoppable machines pushing forward at a terrifying speed. Even Hitler himself was regularly injected with powerful drugs by his personal doctor. This was one of the secret reasons why the German Blitzkrieg, their lightning war, was so incredibly fast and effective in the beginning. By August of 1939, Hitler was ready. He was ready to launch his war. But he knew one thing: if he attacked Poland, Britain and France would finally declare war on him. And he did not want to fight a war on two fronts. So he made a shocking and clever deal with his greatest enemy, Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union. The deal was called the Nazi-Soviet Pact, and it was signed on August 23, 1939. In public, it looked like a peace treaty. But secretly, Hitler and Stalin had agreed to invade Poland together and divide it between them. This deal shocked the entire world. How could the fascists and the communists who hated each other become partners? But now Hitler had nothing stopping him. On September 1, 1939, at 4:45 in the morning, the order was given. German tanks rolled across the border into Poland. German planes appeared in the sky and bombed Polish cities. The world watched in horror. 2 days later, on September 3, 1939, Britain and France finally realized they had no other choice. They declared war on Germany. World War II had officially begun. And that is where our story must pause for today. This is just the beginning. In the next part of our story, I will reveal how Hitler's armies crushed nation after nation, how he shocked the world with his speed and power, and we will talk about the one great mistake that would eventually lead to his downfall. The battles will become bigger, the destruction will be unimaginable, and the final turns in the story will leave you speechless. This was a heavy part of the story. I know, it's a journey into a very dark time in our history, and I am so curious to hear your take on it all. What were your final thoughts as you listened? Do you have any lingering questions about why a country or a leader made a certain choice? Please leave all your opinions, your feelings, and your questions in the comment section below. I truly love reading every single one and building this conversation with all of you. Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned, because history is about to get even more shocking.